Raconteurs and Spoken Realms present Devi Mahatmyam, The Glory of the Goddess, by Sage Markandeya. Translated by Lyndal Vercoe. Read by Tim Bruce.
So, Tim, tell us about this book. First of all, what's it called? I'm funking out because I can't say it.
It's called the Devi Mahatmyam, which is from the Markandeya Purana, which is a very, very old piece of literature, sacred literature from about 550 AD, I think. So its English translation of that is The Glory of the Goddess.
So, why? I mean, what got you into this? It's a somewhat, on the surface anyway, a rather strange choice for a British narrator to narrate. What led you to it?
It's an unusual choice, yes.
I mean,
it's something that's never been done before, although there are plenty of recordings of it as sung Sanskrit music. That's a different thing altogether, though. But it's a standalone story. It's a story of world significance, you can say, as world culture. It's something which is common to all. It describes the Divine Mother. It's probably the first work to really go into the depths as to who that is. I mean, in the Christian tradition, there's a certain amount of it in the Gnostic tradition. They talk about the Earth Mother, but that's very different to the Divine Mother. It's a very different thing. She's only referred to as the Holy Spirit in Christianity. I mean, we don't know anything about it. It's a dove hanging in the air. It's a mystery. And here's a work which goes into very great detail of how she protects, how she nourishes, how it helps the evolution of humankind from amoeba stage, literally. So it's a principle which is incarnated over and over and over again. This is according to the Hindu tradition, and to help us through the various stages of development and to protect us from negativity that is around in the world. There's plenty of it around in the modern world, which is why it's just as relevant today as it always was, really.
And so presumably because of that, it's relevant across all cultures as well. It's not just relevant to the Hindu culture, for example.
No, it is. It's a seminal text for the Hindu culture, obviously, particularly around the time of Navaratri, which is the celebration of 9 nights to the celebration of the goddess. But it's as the protectress, the one who protects. It is about that divine, nurturing, motherly quality, which is so much buried in the West, actually. But it is there, and it always has been there, but it hasn't been so much articulated. I mean, Blake talks about it a lot. For example, he's written whole books about it. Jerusalem is about that. It's about the reflection of that within us and how that enables us to achieve enlightenment, how it helps us to achieve fulfillment and oneness with everything else, because it's the thing which unites everything.
Mm. So obviously how did you find it? How did you come across it? What led you particularly? What's its connection with Tim? I can see its connection with the world, but what led Tim to do it particularly?
It's something that I've been aware of for a very long time. I mean, I've been practicing meditation for more than 30 years, so it's kind of a serious part of my life anyway. But it's only recently that this translation has come up. Prior to that, there were kind of quite stilted, kind of earnest translations that were frankly difficult to read and didn't really leap off the page. And it's since I came across this translation by Lyndal Vercoe, who's a lady who lives in Australia, who I've never met actually, but I've had conversations with her over the phone before. And it's such a lyrical, poetic translation. It's very accessible. I mean, it could almost be like a child's folk tale, actually. It is like a world folk tale. It's essentially about 2 people who find themselves cast out from their normal situation. So one is a king who was overthrown by his son, I think, and then the other is a merchant whose greedy family also kick him out, and they go, well, what's it all about? All that work, all that looking after other people, all those good things I did, and here I am basically on the street, and why? So this propels the story forward, and they basically seek answers for this. And they go to a sage called Sage Midas, and he talks about the meaning of life. He talks about all kinds of really interesting, deep spiritual things, and in the process of that, he talks about the Devi, the goddess, the Divine Mother, and its reflection within us, and how to awaken it within us. So it's a very deep work, but on one level, it's just another story.
I noticed that it's got original music in that you've also composed and sung. Now, it's not the sort of music that most of us would hear in our day-to-day life. How did that happen? What led you to that? I mean, it's wonderful. I love the music, but it's hardly what you hear on Radio 2 all the time.
You might hear on Radio 4, though, or occasionally
on Radio 3,
but not very often.
Yes.
As I said, I mean, I've been meditating for a very long time, and that leads you naturally into Sanskrit culture and Indian culture and the spiritual culture of India, and music is a very big part of that. So, and I've also been a bit of a polyglot down the years, and so having studied Western classical music and Italian opera and German Lieder and all these kind of things, it wasn't a huge leap for me to then go into a different area. It's a stylistic big leap, but not in terms of language, to go then to Hindi, Marathi, but particularly Sanskrit. I mean, Sanskrit is a very, very interesting language. Basically, I mentioned that this reflection of the mother within us is called Kundalini. And as the Kundalini moves through the system, it actually makes particular sounds. And these sounds are the consonants and the vowels, the building blocks, you could say, of the Sanskrit language. So Sanskrit is actually the language of Kundalini. It's the language of the gods. So in terms of, from even an acting perspective, Sanskrit has a very, very interesting resonant capacity in both its sound and its meaning. So it's not just totemic of its meaning. It actually manifests the energy of the thing it also represents. So that's why Sanskrit mantra has a very, very deep quality of invocation, because it actually calls the thing. It has the calling power within that, because it represents and embodies the quality of that thing. It's not just a signpost pointing the way. It is the thing itself. And when you add music to that, it's again another layer. It's another energy of the combined collective power of those notes in a raga, for example. So this composition is in Rag Durga, which is what the Devi is the goddess Durga, the protectress, the mother, and it also very, very closely correlates to the heart chakra. So the energy of the text is giving out that energy of protection. It's giving out that energy of nurturing, of motherliness, and also it's coming from the notes themselves from Rag Durga. So to compose the music in Rag Durga is really giving that power to its maximum effect. So you've got the words, you've got the music, you've got the meaning. Everything is coming together as one. And I should point out that the music is just coming at the end. It's a narration. It's an audiobook. This is an audiobook of Devi Mahatmyam. But music is involved at the end. So there's a couple of extras at the end for you to listen to. And there's a couple of mantras which I insert here and there. But basically it's a story. It's a very deep spiritual story, but it's a story. It's a narration.
So tell me a little bit about the significance for this feast day, this Hindu festival that's coming up, and when it is, and a little bit more about it, and the importance, potentially, of this audiobook for that festival.
Devi Mahatmyam, as I said, is coming from the Markandeya Purana, which is a very ancient text. And Devi Mahatmyam is actually the seminal text for Navaratri. There are two Navaratris, actually, but the main one is this year in October. It varies slightly because of the position of the moon. So this year in 2020, it's between the 17th and the 25th of October, and it's 9 nights. So essentially, Navaratri means 9 nights of worship to the goddess. That's essentially what it means. But each of those 9 nights has a very particular quality. So it's going through 9 chakras. So these chakras are energy centers within the body. So the first day is the first center at the base of the spine, which is about innocence, which is at the root of everything in creation. The Omkar, the Amen, the Word, the Logos, is that. It is that power of innocence and auspiciousness. And so that is focused on the first day. And you work your way up the system. So by the 9th day, you're in literally like 9th heaven, because you go above. Well, yeah, that's Buddhism, but yeah.
Well, yes, but it's heaven is heaven. It's got lots of
heaven is
names.
heaven, indeed. Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
So what happens is that you work it through that, and and the chakras open, and then all the negativity which is affecting each of those chakras is destroyed one by one, so that by the end of that festival, everything is just all that's left to do is to celebrate and to enjoy, basically.
It must have been quite a powerful story, a powerful experience, really, to record it.
Oh, definitely. As I said, it goes absolutely to the core. The problem is there are not many expressions of that kind of depth of spirituality. I mean, as I said, particularly sometimes in Western culture, I mean, it is there in the poets. It is there in Blake, especially in his paintings and writing. It's a very good example. It's there in the music of Mozart and Bach and Handel. I mean, it is there. But what you find is as time goes on, it seems to be less and getting less and less and less as materialism of the Western world just covers everything. I mean, those two characters at the beginning of the story, they're kicked out essentially by materialism.
Yeah, so, very much a story for our time.
And especially, you know, when there's so many pressures on us at the moment, pressure on our chakras. I mean, what is stress? It's pressure on the chakras, actually. It's just that if you're aware of the chakras, then you can actually decode what the problem is and specifically go to that problem and just get rid of it, really. But particularly in the pandemic, of course. I mean, because it helps so much your feeling of well-being and the feeling of protection. I mean, a lot of the problem is actually worrying about the problem. So anxiety.
Yeah.
So if you're not so much worried about it, then your whole sense of well-being is better. And actually your immune system is working at a more effective rate. All the antibodies are produced in that sternum bone area, which is very much to do with heart chakra, center heart particularly. And this story helps increase that energy of the center heart chakra. So it is actually, in a way...
It's a holistic
and it's boosting your immune system in a very deep way.
Yeah. You've been to India, haven't you, Tim?
A lot of times, yes. I mean, that's where I studied music. I mean, I went there a few times. First of all, to study with Arun Apte in a music academy in Nagpur, and then in a place called Vaiterna, which is near Mumbai. But more particularly with Rajan Sajja Misra, the great exponents of Khyal, Indian classical music called Khyal. It's actually a Persian word meaning imagination, but it's very much using the notes in a very free way.
Do you play the sitar?
I have tried. There's a friend of mine who's a very good sitarist, and I couldn't resist but having a go. And I was much better than I thought I was going to be, because I'm not a guitarist. I did try guitar when I was probably about 12. I've never been into strummy guitar music. No, I'm not into pop music much. So I never went into that direction. I was more of a keyboard player and a singer. But yeah, no, I love sitar. Sitar is a wonderful instrument. In fact, the kind of musics that satisfy me most are Western classical and Indian classical, but also I like jazz and some musicals and things like that, and folk music, world folk music, very much like that. Elemental music.
What would you say? What would you say a listener looking for, flicking through Audible? What would they get? Why should Devi be something that they might latch onto? How would I mean? It seems you've explained wonderfully that it has a very broad appeal, but it's not. It's very difficult for people who are not familiar with that culture to realise what they may get out of it, what appeal it might have for them. So how would you sell it to me as somebody who's completely not involved with Indian culture, not involved with anything very spiritual at all? I suppose I'm completely agnostic and atheistic and lapsed in virtually the Western religions. Sell Devi to me as a listen.
It's a good elemental story. It's about feeling good. It's about overcoming all those things that hold us back. It's about becoming your true self. It's about realizing yourself. It's about self-realization. About becoming what you always desired to be, but were never quite sure how to do it. And that story basically points the way. And hopefully, with the music and everything, it might even light that touch paper where it actually happens, where you actually feel that sense of enlightenment. You actually feel in touch with your deeper self.
Thank you, Tim.
And that's quite a unique
there aren't many books that do that. No, there aren't. I can't think. Well, no.
No, I mean, it's not an entertainment distraction. It won't take you away from yourself. It'll take you towards yourself.
Yes.
But it'll lead you by the hand in a very comfortable way, and not a scary way at all.
And it's, the bits that I've listened to, it's a story.
Yes, it is a story.
It's almost like a fairy story in a lot of ways, in that it's as you say, it's these two men have been booted out and they're trying to find their way back, essentially.
And all the stories which actually feature the Devi, they're all huge battle scenes. I mean, massive battle scenes.
Yeah.
At one point, she faces an entire army by herself, and then all these other elements come out of her, and then there's suddenly a huge army, and there's this massive battle scene. I mean, you can just imagine it as a sort of video game almost.
Yes.
These huge forces arrayed against each other.
Yeah. Great stuff. And where is it available, Tim, and when?
It's coming out from 11th of August on Audible. And for about 12 weeks after that, it's available via www.downpour.com as a CD box set.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy listening. Raconteurs and Spoken Realms present Devi Mahatmyam, The Glory of the Goddess, by Sage Markandeya. Translated by Lyndal Vercoe. Read by Tim Bruce. That noble king, Surata, had ruled over his prosperous land like a benevolent father until a conspiracy of jealous kings had attacked his kingdom and reduced it to a single city. Even there, he had been undermined by treacherous ministers. He had escaped assassination, pretending he was going hunting. He had ridden away into the forest wilderness until he found refuge in this peaceful ashram of the Rishi Medas. King Surata was so full of grief, he could not rest. One day, as he wandered, unseeing among the gardens and trees, he discovered another man sitting by the path. This richly dressed man looked despondent. The king asked the stranger tenderly, "Who are you, sir? I feel that you have a heavy heart. What brings you here to this quiet place?" The merchant stood up. He bowed and thanked the king for his kind attention as he introduced himself. His name was Samadhi. They sat together and told each other of their losses. The merchant had been cruelly thrown out of his own home by a disloyal wife and greedy sons. "But, O king, I cannot stop worrying about their welfare. I love them all, and fear for their souls that they should have acted so wickedly." The king's voice was gentle and soothing. "It seems strange, don't you feel, that you grieve and worry for these people when they have been so unfeeling towards you?" The merchant responded, "O king, even as you were speaking, the same thought occurred to me. I wonder what binds us so deeply to our fates when we are helpless to alter these situations." "Since our fates have brought us here," the king said, "let us seek the advice of the great Rishi Medas on the matter." They rose together, and with purposeful steps they approached the Rishi's dwelling place. The king and the merchant each bowed respectfully to touch the feet of the ancient sage, Medas. He gestured invitingly. When they were seated, his kind eyes looked inquiringly, and the king spoke for both of them, saying, "Beloved teacher, I just want to know one thing. This problem obsesses my mind, but my intellect cannot resolve it. I am still obsessed about my kingdom and all the business of rulership. I know this is foolish, yet I cannot help behaving like an ignorant person. Why is this, O best of Munis? And here, too, is this man thrown out by his household as worthless, and yet he still feels such affection towards them. So we are both very unhappy, our minds always drawn by self-centered thoughts to these matters, even though we see it as foolishness. How can we be so deluded, and yet still aware of that? How can we both be so lacking in discrimination that we indulge in this state of despair?" The Rishi said, "The understanding of all creatures is relative to their field of perception. Some are blind by day, and some by night. All are limited. Mankind is certainly not any more aware than the deer, the birds, or others. All creatures are compassionate beings. O king, as you sit mourning, can't you see the birds busy feeding their young? Although they themselves are hungry, just like you, they are bound to their offspring, expecting loyalty in return. This delusion is the power of Mahamaya, which binds all creatures throughout their lives. This illusion makes them believe their existence is permanent. This power is the great goddess, the Devi."